Page 81.
You said 81, right?
Yes, ma'am. Page 81. There's
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, the box at the top. Okay, waiting room. Okay, we got someone else jumping on board. Looks like Vicky's jumping on board with us. All right. I don't see Yosia right now. Faith, can I go ahead and ask you to read what's in the box at the top of page 81? It's the fourth commandment.
Yeah. Honor your father and your mother. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not
Yep, despise.
despite or anger our parents, other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them.
Yes. Page 81. So it starts with mom and dad, right? It moves from that to everybody else. Let me see here. Okay. Need to send a message to someone. Okay, so fourth commandment. So not just mom and dad, but other authorities. We get into our teachers, our school principals. Starts with mom and dad. But again, Luther wrote the explanation here. You do find Luther's thoughts, like similar thoughts throughout the Bible. Like in Romans 13, we read that earlier about obeying the authorities. But Luther wrote this explanation, so it's not in the Bible, but those thoughts are in the Bible. It starts with mom and dad. Those are the first authorities put in our life, right? From the time we're little bitty. If we don't get that part right, we may have a hard time obeying the other authorities that God asks us to obey. Policemen, I know there's been a lot of stuff going on with mixed thoughts about police. I get that. But, they are authorities, so we have to figure out in all of that, if we think the authorities aren't acting right, how do we keep our Christian duty of obedience and still say, we don't agree with some things you're doing, can you change those things we don't agree with? So that's a thought for the moment. Right now we're in that moment where people are bringing those thoughts up more. So we have some thoughts about how we manage those different things. Okay, so that makes this very timely. Okay, so why does this commandment focus on parents and other authorities? That's number 54 here. And just to sum it up, our mother and father are God's representatives on earth. I know sometimes we don't think of mom and dad that way, because moms and dads annoy us. Sometimes you unfortunately annoy moms and dads. That it goes both ways. We're human beings. If our moms and dads are really, really awful parents, we may pick up ideas about God that aren't particularly helpful. But they are still placed over us, and so, we got to follow that. Hopefully, though, you have very good parents, and like when you were young, First taking your first steps. You might have been one of those kids that like to run out into the street. Is that a good idea? 2 years old running out into the street, is that a good idea?
No.
No. So moms and dads have to stop that, right? You first go off to kindergarten, and I said it starts with teachers. You whack the kid in the seat next to you. Can the teacher just let that go? Can the teacher just be letting people whack each other in class?
No.
No, it doesn't work. Does not work. So, anyway, again, trying to keep up with a couple of lines of technology. Hi, Vicki. So even when the parents irritate us, even when the teacher irritates us, even when the principal irritates us, there's a reason why God puts authorities in place. So, despising means to look down on someone or make fun of them. We're on the top of page 82 now. Looking down on someone, making fun of them. We definitely are commanded not to do that to our parents and not to do that to other authorities. Even though our parents will make mistakes, and hopefully your parents are the sort that can apologize when they make mistakes, because we all make mistakes. If you get away with just despising them, all of the order and harmony on this earth starts to break down. Because all of our lives we're going to have to follow the orders and directions and commands of imperfect people. Bosses that are sometimes annoying, teachers that are annoying, people that make mistakes or make decisions that aren't particularly helpful, but they're still the people in charge, and we have to figure out how to live our lives still obeying those people. So, again, hopefully your parents are great parents. I know most of your parents, I believe they're lovely people with the best intentions at heart. But sometimes even the best of parents make mistakes, but God commands us to obey them. So, could someone at the Figueroa household please read verse 142 at the top of page 82?
Okay.
Thank you.
Says, listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old.
Yeah. Listen to your parents. So moving on, we fear and love God by receiving and recognizing parents and authorities as God's representatives. There's a part of the story of the crucifixion down in verse 144 where Jesus was dying on the cross, and he was concerned enough about his mother Mary. Even though he knew, I'm rising from the dead in a couple days, he still wanted his mother taken care of, sent her home with his disciple John. We obey in letter C our parents, pastors, teachers, employers, and government authorities. Can I get Daisy to read verse 146 at the bottom of page 82?
Yeah. 146?
Uh-huh.
Hey, stop talking to me. Oh my god. Okay. Hebrews 3:17. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls. And no, as those who will have to give an account, let them do this with joy and not with grumbling, for that would be of no advantage to you.
Yeah, so this is talking more about church leaders. It suggests that someday God is going to ask church leaders, what they did with their work. And, if you despise the people that are trying to teach you at church, that includes Sunday school teachers from way back when you were little bitty, despising them and what they have to tell you, it's not good for your soul. It doesn't help you grow. And so, especially pastors, that's part of their actual job, because a pastor means a shepherd. And so Just like a shepherd has to explain what happened to the sheep, where are they all at? It's suggesting pastors are going to have to also give that kind of account. What about the sheep that were entrusted to you? So don't make that job harder for them, right? And then Romans 13:1, we talked about that earlier, being subject to the governing authorities. And I mentioned that a little bit ago. Your police, your firemen, your state governor, your legislature. We're blessed to live in a country where we can elect our leaders. But back in Christ's day, the government, and actually Paul wrote these words just a little bit after Jesus went back up into heaven. But back in those days, you didn't get to choose your government. They had cruel, harsh people that ruled over them a lot of the time. And yet Paul said, by the direction of God, to obey those leaders. In school, some of you that have been studying history, any of you study communist and the people ruling Russia for a while? Anybody study that? After World War II, the communists took over Eastern Europe and Russia and China. Well, there have always been Christians in China. There were Christians in Russia while they were communist. Even though they prayed and they asked God to relieve them from that government because the communist governments didn't like Christians, they still followed the rules and they did what they could legally do, but they didn't. The Christians left it to God to replace that government. So we're called on to obey unless, and this was a hard thing that Christians in those strict governments had to face, unless they were told something like you can't worship Christ anymore. And they would still continue to worship Christ, and if they got caught at it, they had to face the penalties. So that's one of the challenges of being Christian in another part of the world. Here, if we don't like someone in anywhere from 2 to 4 years, we can take the opportunity to try and vote someone else into office. Okay, so this is going on. What if my connections and applications? What if my parents and other authorities poorly carry out those duties? We talked about that a little while ago. All over the nation, and people have different feelings about what's going on with that, but there are people protesting police. But we also don't have a right, your guys are underage to be protesting, but even if someone felt it was their duty to go to a protest, if that was what they felt was the right thing, they don't have the right while they're at the protest to harm or kill another person, to throw things at a policeman, even to despise a policeman and to call him names. Even if you're going to go make your voice heard, we still don't have the right to be destructive or despise or disobey laws. So it says, am I required to obey other authorities?
Wait, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I thought it was okay to protest without, threatening or even, doing what they're doing.
That's what
You can peacefully protest.
That's what I was getting at. We can protest if we don't break the law. We're still not allowed to break the law. Yeah. Absolutely, that's what I was getting at. We're allowed to protest, but we're not allowed to break the law. Now, at your ages, I don't know if any of you are going to be out protesting. That's mostly people that have turned 18 or maybe people who are teenagers. The older teens, their parents might let them go. But yeah, no calling the cops names, no throwing water bottles at them, no getting into altercations with them, even to the point of actually not resisting arrest. Even if the arrest is unfair, we need to speak up in court and say it wasn't fair. But
Is Vicky on?
She was. Yeah, looks like she's on. So those are some challenging moments. Now we're getting to the point, do we have to obey them without question? And this is what I referred to before. No, we must disobey them if they require us to disobey God's word. I referred to the communist earlier. There's in the Middle East, in Muslim-controlled countries, they will kill you for being a Christian. But Christians there still follow God. The first verse is kind of the classic text. If you want to put a star by number 149, some people call this civil disobedience. This is kind of the classic text. All of these refer to it, but this Acts 5:29 is the classic text for that. And what the lead up to this is Peter and John, not long after Jesus went back into heaven, their rulers in that little piece of land they lived in Palestine, in Judea, were the Sanhedrin, the Jewish priestly authorities who had seen to it that Pilate killed Jesus. They were actually responsible for Jesus' death. And so the Sanhedrin, this group of Jewish leaders, tries to tell Peter and John, we don't want you preaching in Christ's name anymore. And this is what Peter says on behalf of Peter and John and all Christians. Israel, are you there? Can you read for us verse 149 on page 83? Are you there to be able to read for us? Not seeing your face right now. Oh, okay.
What page is it?
We are on page 83, verse number 149.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go ahead and get you to read it, Faith? I think Israel may be having some technical troubles.
First of all, hi JJ. Anyways, what page?
Page 83, verse 149.
Do we read?
I asked Faith to read, yeah. I'll ask you to read next time.
We must obey God rather than men.
Okay. So this is the one out we have. If someone tells us not to follow things about our Christian faith, then we obey God instead of men, or instead of human authorities. All right, any questions about this so far? Now, in the old school days, the way they laid this out in the catechism, the full commandment is you shall honor your father and your mother, that it may go well with you and you may live long on the earth. This is the one commandment that has a promise attached to it. So flipping over to page 84, there's a promise attached to it, that you may live long on this earth, live long on the land. Now, doesn't necessarily mean you may go get a glass of water. It highlights the importance of obedience, of obeying our parents. Looks like we lost Israel for a moment, and I don't see an invite to come back in. Let's see here. Keep an eye on that. All right. Moving on to the fifth commandment. Does one of you over at the Figueroa household want to read what's in the box, top of page 85?
Do we read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You should not murder. You should not.
Wait a second. She's gonna read it.
Okay, go ahead.
You should not murder. What is this meaning? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbors in His body, but help and support in every physical need.
Okay. The old way that they translated it was you shall not kill, but the Hebrew word actually is murder. And that clears up some of the confusion, because then people used to ask about, well, what about soldiers? And what about if I have to defend my life? Looks like we've lost Vicky and we've lost Israel somewhere along the way. And I don't see them in the waiting room. So I'm going to send just a moment, everyone. I'm going to send a text to a couple parents.
Ms. Byers, can I go to the bathroom real quick?
Yes. Does anybody else need a bathroom break right quick? Okay, so if I get a lot of texts. Anybody else? Everybody else doing okay? Okay. We're going to start up again with the folks that we have back. So we're on page 85. You shall not murder. And Martin Luther, again, he always makes sure that we don't give ourselves an out like, hey, I haven't killed anyone this week. I'm pretty good. Martin Luther's exact words aren't in the Bible, but he does find those very thoughts in the Bible. Because we might not have murdered anyone this week, literally, but we've all done something that's probably harmed someone. So we're going to work on, or we're going to take a look at about how, because again, remember, going back to the uses of the law and the gospel, the law shows us our sin. So if we don't apply that to ourselves, it doesn't do us any good. It's not something where we're just going around pointing our finger at everyone else like, hey, I didn't kill anyone this week, so I'm pretty good. The point is to see ourselves in these things with the law and to change our actions when we have done wrong, but primarily to come to Christ for forgiveness and say, I did this. I can't just be blaming everyone else around me. I did it too. I did this. I need to ask for forgiveness. So Martin Luther makes sure when he explains each of these commandments that he explains them so thoroughly we can't just be blaming someone else. Yes, ma'am.
Do you see Victory in the lobby? Or like...
I don't see anybody in the waiting room right now. Israel's dad's trying to get him back on another device. But I don't know where Vicky is. So...
Let me ask.
Yeah, I don't see her in the waiting room. I emailed her, or I texted her mom. Okay. So, remember that the second part of the Ten Commandments, it's summed up by loving your neighbor as yourself. Yes, that's a little distracting though. So if you could turn that background off, I'd appreciate it. It might distract might distract the other kids in class. Okay, Heidi says that it seems to shut Vicky out. That's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oops.
We can't hear you.
You can hear me?
Okay, yeah, I hear you now. I'm going to admit you back to the waiting room. Okay, I let her in. Thanks. Okay, so we've got... We can hear you. Can't see you, though.
Why y'all yelling?
All right, Vicky, we're on page 85, talking about the fifth commandment. So yeah, the second part of this is summed up by you should love your neighbor as yourself. That's what Jesus told people. It recommends here you can read Luke 10:25-37, the story of the Good Samaritan. We referred to that the other week, about the Samaritan, they were people that weren't very liked. Do you guys remember this from Sunday school? People didn't like, the Jews didn't like Samaritans too much. This guy gets beat up by a couple robbers. He's a Jewish guy. You're nodding your head. You feel comfortable telling the rest of the story, Daisy, or you want me to finish it?
Wait, is it the one with like the Good Samaritan where like a couple of people passed by and then only one helped him?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the one who helped him was a Samaritan that the Jews hated. And so Jesus talked about neighbors. Yeah. Our neighbor is anybody. It's not just that family that lives next door to us, but it's the rest of the human community, right? And that talks about that on question 59. Everybody from the moment of conception. So murder, we don't want to take someone's life without just cause. That's question 60, part A, and it has a verse, Psalm 10:8, about wicked people lying in ambush for people. But the story I wanted to talk about was Cain and Abel. Anybody remember that? And it refers to it here in Genesis chapter 4. Anybody know who Cain and Abel was? Anybody remember that story? Genesis chapter 4.
Is it page 86?
Yeah, page 86. But the whole story is not printed here. You would have to have your Bible, Genesis chapter 4. Anybody remember who Cain and Abel were from way back in Sunday school? It's the story of the first murder. Well, they were Adam and Eve's first two sons. And Cain was the older one. Anybody remember?
Bible.
Pardon me? Mm-hmm.
Get the Bible.
Yeah, you would find it in Genesis chapter 4 in your actual Bible. Genesis chapter 4. So Cain and Abel. I'm losing everybody's video. Could some of you turn your video back on? I know some of you might not be able to, but it's a little distracting. I'm just seeing blank squares now, and that's what your other friends are seeing too. Some of you may not be able to, I get it, but if you're able to turn your video on, please do so we can see you. Now I lost Faith, who was on video.
Yeah, Faith just said she wanted to turn it off.
Yeah. I know Yosia might not be able to there in the mall. Vicky, if you're able to turn your video on, your friends might like to see you here in class. So anyway, Cain and Abel. So Cain got jealous of Abel because God liked Abel's sacrifices better. Cain got jealous and murdered him and then tried to hide it. And so God came to Cain and put a mark of some sort on him. We don't know what it was. But he put a mark on Cain so other people wouldn't come along and murder Cain because he'd murdered his brother. Because then Cain was worried about that. But yeah, first murder, right? First generation after the first sin, Adam and Eve eating the fruit they shouldn't have eaten. Their very own children, one murders his brother. Pardon me?
Page again, please.
We're now on page 86 because the thing in the Bible is everybody would be on a different page. All of our Bibles are a little bit different. But if you look in the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and you look in chapter 4, that's the story of Cain and Abel. But moving on to verse 154 on page 86. Uh-huh. One of you girls at the Figueroa household want to read?
Yeah, but it's right here.
Okay.
It says,
Can I go get... Wait, sorry. Vicky wants me to go get her water, so I'll be right back.
Okay.
it says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with all malice.
Yeah, malice.
to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you.
Yeah, malice, extreme hatred, because it's usually malice that leads to murder. Anybody remember the story of Joseph in the Old Testament? Joseph with his bright colored coat. Anybody remember that one? And it refers to that here again in the boldface
Didn't his
stuff.
brothers throw him down a well or something?
They did. Some of them had planned to kill him, and one of them said, "Let's not kill him. Let's throw him down the well." And then they sold him into slavery, right? So they didn't kill him, but they sure hurt or harmed him because Joseph was in prison and mistreated and more or less a slave for years until he became an assistant to Pharaoh. And then he turned around and forgave his brothers and saved his brothers and their families, right? It does say in the Bible you can practice self-defense. That's also something in our society that you likely will not get charged for murder if you're protecting yourself. If someone pulls a weapon on you, or is even like if they're using their bare hands in a way that may kill you, you're allowed to protect yourself. It also talks about not neglecting people who need help with their bodily needs. Again, Luther a lot of times puts that positive stuff out there instead of just talking about the don't do this or don't do that.
Look at a pencil rope.
Okay. And so, verse number 155 on page 86. Faith, would you read that? Yeah.
What page?
Page 86, verse number 155 from Deuteronomy 15:11.
Okay. For there will never to be poor in the land, therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brothers.
Yeah. So we're on the fifth commandment still, Israel. We're over on page 86. And we're talking about it's more than just not killing someone. It's actually doing good for someone. So it's talking about feeding people who are hungry. I know sometimes